Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we got a video just discussing a sort of beginner's guide for using Recon. A lot of you guys requested this video, so I wanted to go ahead and get this out there to help you guys be more effective and efficient using reconnaissance. Because to be honest, I think this is the hardest area for me to use. I think it's really hard for a lot of people. This is going to be the hardest thing to do, is using and being effective with Recon. It's just really hard to know how to you have the general idea of how to use them. You know, you want to get them behind enemy lines, and you want to gather intelligence and so on and so forth, but it's really hard to sort of execute that. So in this guide is what I want to really use to be able to help you do that. So getting started, there's sort of first two things that you want to keep in mind when you're using reconnaissance, and this is what you're going to want to keep in mind throughout the video. So the first thing is what you're going to be using reconnaissance for generally is just gathering intelligence, right? You just want to be able to get the whereabouts of the enemy units and see what units that they're pumping out from their base. And for the second one, these are just two simple things that you want to keep in mind for, sort of building a foundation for using reconnaissance. The second thing is that you're going to want to be disrupting their backlines. So that what that looks like is mainly taking out their artillery and their anti-air, and occasionally taking out their tanks when they're bunched up together. So those are the two first things that are going to be, you're going to want to have sort of as a foundation and as a guide of what you're going to want to be doing when you have recon units, right? So the first thing is gathering intelligence, and the second thing is disrupting the enemy backline. So with those two things in mind, let's go ahead and get into the units that I think are pretty good, or just a unit overview and what they're going to do and what you're going to want to have to do those two things. So first, I think you're going to want to get yourself some sort of snipers, reconnaissance units, sort of deep cover. And the way that you're going to tell if they're pretty good for, especially if they're really stealthy, is you're going to go over here to the far right. You're going to look under stealth, and so it divides the enemy detection range by this amount. And usually you're going to want to have units that are either 2.5 to 3, and we see that these ranger snipers are 3, and these are really good for really being stealthy, getting in deep cover, and not making the position well known, and be able to sort of see what's out there and to laze enemy units for artillery. So now, the reason why you're going to want to use these ones over, let's say, you in pararescue, is that they have laser designation. Now this is going to be important later on in the video, and I'll explain why. But you're going to want to choose some sort of infantry units that is capable of being really secretive, being really stealthy in the enemy backlines. Now you could use vehicles, but the problem with the vehicles is that they're not as stealthy. Like if you go over here to the Fist V, we see that it only has a stealth of about 1.25, and that's not really good. It's going to be really easy to see them from, say, from the enemy's position. So that's why you're going to want to choose a unit, first and foremost, that has a really good stealth number, which is, for this one, 3. So now we got that figured out. So what are we going to want to bring when we're trying to get our infantry or trying to get our recon units behind enemy lines? Now the most important thing is I wouldn't recommend using air. The reason being is that while the stealth hawk can be really good, is that if there's enemy, let's say enemy air, or if they already have some for reconnaissance units out there, it's just a little more risky using air. So you can do it, but it's a little more risky. And I think that you want a unit that's cheap and super fast when you're bringing your sort of scouts or your ranger snipers in to the backline. And for that, I think the RSOV is perfect. Not only is it pretty fast, but it's also really cheap. So we see here that is 130 speed, 130 forward speed. That is really good. So we could use these, and we could also take 2 of our ranger snipers in here, since we only have 3 units, and this fits 6. So this is what you're first going to want to do. You're going to want to focus on getting a unit that is stealthy, and then focus on transportation that is quick and cheap. So that way you're able to get multiple of them out there behind the back lines, and you're not worrying about them being spotted. And you're going to also, well, actually we'll talk about later in the video. So first and foremost, that's what you're going to want to do. And we're going to keep it really simple in this beginner's guide, because I don't want to go too in depth. I want you guys to be able to focus on just simple things that you could do to be effective and efficient using recon, and then sort of having that foundation, and then from there expanding upon that. So that's our first thing, and that's for doing both gathering intelligence and disrupting disrupting the backline. And we'll go ahead and get more into the sort of ins and outs of how we're going to do that. But another thing you're going to want to do when you have reconnaissance is you're going to want to get some sort of drone. And for this tech, we're just using I should have said that earlier, we're using the special forces and the armor for the US faction. So we have our ranger snipers, and we have our quick means of transportation for the backline. So we're going to be using them for gathering intelligence and also disrupting the enemy backline. right? So now we'll get more into that later on in the video, but for our merely purely gathering intelligence of the sort of map what's going on in the map, I would like to use the Sentinel. The reason why I choose the Sentinel over, let's say, the Reaper is that the Sentinel has a better stealth number. It has a 1.75, and this really comes in, guys. And it's also quicker too. For if you were able to sort of micromanage this enough, really getting a drone that has a really high speed, such as this one, and if you notice that's getting shot out, you could actually select this unit and really just spam on your backline to get them to run away from that missile. And most of the time, they'll be able to evade the enemy AA. Now, our Reaper, the reason why I don't really like using this, especially mainly for intel gathering, is that it's more likely to be seen. So he has a 0.50 less than stealth than the Sentinel. The Sentinel is just really good at, not only is the Sentinel really good at gathering intelligence, but it's also really good at evading or running away from enemy missiles from AA. Now, the Reaper is good overall, I would say, but it doesn't have the same benefits that a Sentinel has. And the same thing applies for the Russian faction. If you have units that are like this, the same sort of concepts and the same numbers that we see here, whatever the like is for Russian, it applies there too. Excuse me. So the reason why I don't like using the Reaper is that, it does have these capabilities of dropping bombs and, anti-air and whatnot. That's not what I want to focus on using for, right? I want to purely have a drone that's just for gathering intelligence, and that's what the Sentinel does way better than the Reaper. The Reaper is good. It does have those other capabilities, but it comes at the sacrifice of speed and stealth. And here we just want to focus on intelligence. So that's why it just makes it easier too, because you're not too worried about getting the Reaper out there to take out enemy infantry or vehicles or air. So you're just having the Sentinel just purely for intelligence, which makes it easier on you guys, so you're not having to do much more or worry about more. So you now have so this one's purely on the first point of just gathering intelligence. The Rangers, we have being able to do both, gathering intelligence and disrupting the enemy backline. So once we have that, this is just, we're going to keep it simple, guys. Just that's all you really need to focus on. You don't have to, you can bring some other units here. Like I like bringing the cavalry scouts with their Recon Bradley, and I like having my Rangers reconnaissance. But I think essentially when you're thinking of Recon, you're not thinking of sort of the support Recon. You're thinking of the main Recon. And the main Recon in your reconnaissance tab is going to be some form of snipers or reconnaissance units and a drone for intelligence gathering on the map. So once we have that, we'll go ahead and get into actually how to use these and utilize them. And but first, before we do that, let's go in and figure out. So when you figure out like sort of how to disrupt the enemy line for our second point. And so we see that we have this laser designation, right? And we'll go ahead and explain that further in the video. But you're going to want to make sure, in order to actually disrupt the enemy line, that you're bringing some form of artillery or air units that is able of shooting a missile that is laser guided. And for this, it could be anything, but what I like to use, where I've found more success, is using the GMLRS. And this is what I have it loaded with, cluster warheads, because you're going to be mainly focusing on destroying enemy artillery, anti-air, or vehicles. So you're going to want to bring cluster warheads. And the reason why you're doing that is because the cluster warheads, if we go over here to this, we see that it does a lot of top damage. Top armor damage, it does about 200 millimeters of explosive damage, which is pretty good. Now, if you were to choose just regular explosive warheads, it's not going to be doing that. It could do some damage to arty and to some anti-air, but it's not as effective as these cluster warheads. They also do cluster damage and top damage, and it's laser designated. So we'll go over later in the video on how to actually use the laser designation. It seems more complicated than it actually is, but it's actually pretty simple. And another tip here is that you're going to want to use artillery that has a really long range. And so the GMLRS actually has a pretty good range, as you can see here. So the effective range is from 1,800 to 6,000 meters, which is pretty good. And so, but you're going to want to bring something that has, remember, you want to sort of limit the gap between your reconnaissance units and your artillery. So if the closer you have to bring the recon unit or your artillery units to the recon, the less, the sort of more risk you're posing for your artillery. And you're going to really want to be careful with your artillery. So remember, bring some form of unit to be able to actually make use of your reconnaissance units in the back line. So your recon, remember, you have two key points that you want to keep in mind. So you have so the recon units, the snipers that we have, are either going to be just purely gathering intelligence. So you're going to have them near where where they're deploying units, so that we can just get intelligence on what they are producing for their front line. And you're going to have the second point of actually disrupting their back line. And we'll go ahead and look at that further. But before we even do that, you're going to want to make sure you're actually bringing something so you could actually be effective with the laser designation. And so here, and you could tell if it's laser designated right here, laser guided. And this, you could still use it, this GMLRS, without the laser designation, but it's much more effective if you're using laser designation. So you're not using this as a laser designation, your other units is going to be the one that is laser guiding for this unit to actually shoot at and guide their missiles to that. So you're going to want to bring some form of laser guided unit. This could be this, it could be the Paladin. I find more success using the GMLRS. So save that. And then you could also use Air 2. I like to bring the Nighthawk. This, and I use the AGM, JASM, and remember, I think the key thing too when you're using laser guided is you want to be focusing on the effective range and the sort of armor penetration. So we see here that the effective range is 2,000 to 10,000 meters. That is a pretty good range, guys. Really, really good. So this is really effective for that. Now, the problem with this one, the ballistic missile or the cruise missile, is that it can get shot down by AA. So this is more of a sort of just in case, like just in case you want to use this, you could have it there. So, or if you have, let's say, some form of heli or air that has laser guided, you want to bring something that is going to be able to utilize the Rangers or Recon or whatever unit you have in the back line, utilize their capability of laser designation. So from there, let's go ahead and get into our actual video of how we're going to use these guys. At the beginning of this game, I'm going to go over and give a sort of analysis of how I'm using the Recon at the beginning of the game. So let's skip all this. So the way I like to use the Rangers, as I said, is that, remember, you're keeping in mind two key things. You want to focus on one, you're either going to do purely intelligence, or two, disrupting the enemy line. So now with our Rangers, we're going to be doing both. So we get our RSOV, and we get two Rangers right here. We get two Ranger snipers, and they're able to fit into one RSOV. And the RSOV is really, really fast. So we're going to utilize this to get right in between the middle of their backline. So here, so we're putting them over here. And so you're going to have sort of, think of like you have your front line, the back line, and then the medium back line, and then the back line of where they're spawning units. So where you're going to want to put your recon units for, at least when you're going to be focusing on disrupting the enemy backline with the laser designation, you're going to want to put them somewhere right around here, right behind the zones, not directly in front of their spawning area. That, if you're going to do that, that's purely for intelligence. You're going to put them there. You're going to put your recon units there just to gather information on what units that they are sending out. Now, for this one, if you're wanting to disrupt the enemy line, that's the other point that you're going to keep in mind. You're going to want to keep your enemy or your snipers somewhere right around here, not directly where their ground forces are spawning or where their spawn units are, but somewhere over here. So that way, because you know that they're going to be most likely, they're not going to be sending artillery out from over here. They might do some ballistic missiles or AA, but you're mainly going to focus on over here, disrupting their backline. That's where they're going to have most of their AA to take out your helis or your air, and have their artillery to disrupt your line. So we get them there, we spawn them there. As you can see, they're just right over here. They're not too far from the objectives, but they're far enough to be able to spot enemy artillery and AA. And we'll actually go and see that being effective here. So once we drop those guys off over here, and make sure too, it's a key thing, you want to make sure that you're pressing H on all of these, so that way they're not firing automatically. They're on return fire only, so they're going to hold fire until they get fired upon. So now we have these Ranger snipers here. We see that they have made some sort of they become aware of some enemy units here. They have some intelligence as to regards of where the whereabouts of them. So that's what we're going to want to do. It's perfect. So we're able to utilize these Rangers. They're in a good spot. We see their anti-air, right? Usually, sometimes, we do see over here, if you see the smoke. Now, we're not focused on the left side. You're going to want to be focusing on just one side of the map. If you spread them out too much, it's just going to be sort of overextending yourself. So remember, guys, you want to start off slow and then build from there. So here we're just focusing on the back line on the right side, where our units are generally are. And we see that we have we'll be able to see where the unit is at, the AA. So now how we're going to use our artillery for this is that, so here's our GMLRS. We see that we have laser designated the AA. So the way that you're going to laser designate them is once they become, and speed this up, Now become aware of the AA there, and what you want to do is once you do that, once you become aware of them, you want to click on the unit, the sniper unit, and you want to press N on them. And once you press N, you want to make sure there's no obstacles in the way of their visual. And once you hold N, you can click. Let's go ahead and speed this down. I'm going to click on the unit, and the way that you know that they have sort of a lock on with their laser is that you'll see this green line, and this green line is key, right? And it will follow them even if they move in a certain position. And so this lock on, perfect. You hold in and you will laser guide, have a laser lock on the enemy unit that you're looking at. So from here, we're gonna go ahead and we notice that we have that. We have our GMLRS. If we can find it, and you're gonna want to let's go ahead and select it. I believe I select it here. Let's go back. So we come over here to our GLMRS, just a few seconds. And what you're going to do with your laser designated unit is you're just going to click it. You're going to select, I believe it's T for fire mission, and you're just going to shoot it in that general area. And what's going to happen is when it launches, it's going to actually just follow, or you'll see. So you click it on there. Remember, we have our cluster warheads for most effective against vehicles. And we see just right. Let's see, did it shoot it? Now look how it follows. This is what's going to happen when you have laser designation. It is going to follow and seek out from the laser to its target. And it's going to hit exactly on top of them. So even if they try to run away, these missiles are going to identify that laser, and they're going to lock onto that target, and they're going to destroy it. And we see we got a kill there. So that is how you're going to want to use for step 2 of disrupting the enemy backline. You're going to have a reconnaissance units that's not too far away from the sort of zones that they have, and that's sort of in the middle between the zones and their spawn base, right? So that way you're able to identify targets and sort of destroy them with your reconnaissance units. So that's how you're going to use for following for step 2 of disrupting the backline using reconnaissance. And then for the first step, all you're going to do basically for gathering intelligence is you're going to want to get a recon unit like this one over here, get them a little bit closer in the forest to where they're spawning, preferably where they can see a road, so that way you're able to identify enemy units and what they're bringing, so that way you know what you need to have to counter them. So that's pretty much it for this one. And when it comes to bringing the recon for air, bringing in a recon drone, for example, the Sentinel, you're going to want to keep them more in the back line. You don't want to keep them in the middle between the zones. It's going to get shot at by AA. But just in case, if you do bring them a little bit closer to the zones, let's say around here, you're going to want to keep an eye on him, because if AA shoots at him, you don't want to spam click in the back. So that way you're able to get your recon drone, especially the Sentinel, because it's pretty fast. You're going to be able to most likely get away from those AA. And also you got to pay attention to the recon drone, the Sentinel, because it does have a certain amount of gas, and you don't want it to run out of gas and die. You want to be able to use it, utilize it, get it out of there before it crashes and burns. So that's pretty much it for this guide. It's super simple. I want to keep it sort of as effective and efficient as possible for you guys, because recon, to be honest, is probably one of the hardest things that you're going to do. You just got to learn with experience how to actually use it, and hopefully this video helps you guys with what to do in regards to using reconnaissance, and just to be more effective, and from here build a foundation for being sort of getting what you like and what you want to do with reconnaissance. This is just sort of, again, just a foundation for you guys to build upon, a simple guide for beginners to help you be more effective, because as we have seen here, we're able to utilize the reconnaissance to be able to destroy their AA. But that's going to be pretty much it for the video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope that this video did actually help you guys, get somewhere to start with using reconnaissance, and I hope that it actually makes it a little bit more easier for you guys. So with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.